When we experience change in our lives, it can be quite disruptive. But if you experience change in an incrementally continuous flow, think about the last 2 years of COVID regulations. All that change just turns into a background hum that you manage to live on top of. We're willing to celebrate a pandemic becoming endemic, with us but in the background continuously. But what about climate change? Have we already tuned out the constant hum of climate change? One of the struggles with climate change is our short attention spans. Say a word enough times and it loses its meaning. The same can be said for climate change. Some people, like Timothy Morton, say the word doesn't encapsulate the true issues at hand, global warming. I've also definitely been around people that have demonstrated what I would call the Anthropocene eye roll, that expression of, ugh, are we on this again? With constant media bombardment, it's expected we struggle with a degree of fatigue. To say it another way, there seems to be a need to diversify the message. We have to go beyond the climate change disaster stories in the media or the reports of ethical breaches from corporations selling us technologies we're told we can't live without. People, like the social anthropologist Donna Haraway, have introduced new vocabulary, like Jathulocene and Capitalocene, to open the conversation up and even remind us that much of this is more than a human event. Because names are important, and the evolution of our vocabulary over the last few decades has played a big role in how we come to terms with what is occurring around us. Our choice of vocabulary shifts the filters of what we can see around us. New vocabulary helps us grasp previously unknowable events. New vocabulary helps us to tell new stories. Beyond the language we use are the stories we tell. If inventing nouns belongs to the writers and climatological data belongs to government agencies, how are the rest of us contributing to this collective knowledge? The author Amy Brady says that what most of us can do is bear witness, cataloging the memories of what we no longer experience in nature, recounting what we once saw and heard, standing as a witness to the past we no longer can show our children or friends. Bearing witness can take many forms.
Here's the remarkable part. This is the part that stuns me, is that when you look at the science, it's evident that I'm a child of the 90s. When I was a kid, the Earth was still a relatively climate stable planet. The worst effects of the climate crisis and the majority of the greenhouse gases that humanity has spewed into the air have happened in the last 35 to 40 years. That means the climate crisis as we know it has happened within my lifetime. And that's astounding to think about. Because that means that I remember what life on planet Earth was like, quote unquote, before the climate went haywire. And I'm likely one of the last people on Earth who's going to have that memory. And what a weight to bear, right? And while it's important, it's emphatically important that we talk about as a society and in terms of our political power to try to find solutions to the climate crisis. One other responsibility that I feel like we have is to bear witness to this unprecedented moment in human history. And by capturing these stories of what it was like before and what it's like to live through this transformational moment is an incredibly powerful story to be told.
Beyond the seemingly unanswerable big questions of how we might live through this great change and how we shape future change, there are more accessible questions we can tackle today. How do we go about not becoming complacent to all this change around us? How do we keep it all in the foreground? How do we not get climatized to all this change? Because it's going to be with us for a very long time. Keeping change new is becoming a novel problem.